Hello, everybody. Welcome to IST 110. I'm, of course, Professor S, and this is today's slides. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the lecture, and then I'll go over some reminders. And the lecture today is going to include everything, well, all the material that we haven't covered before the quiz. And I'll talk more about the quiz in the reminder. So that's towards the end of the video. All right, anyways, let's get into it. So first thing that we're going to talk about is IP licensing. So IP, of course, means for intellectual property. We talked about that in the last video, or last class. Anyways, when we're talking about when you have specific IP, you can license it out to people for whatever the reason. Usually, I guess it's for them to make their own money or whatever they're going to use it for. But anyways, when you're with the IP licenses, it's a contract between the user and the copyright holder. And so those agreements can include distribution, like who you can sell it to or who you can give it to, what sort of modifications you can make to it, the limitations of what you can do with it, any warranties that happen. So that's like things that they would have to cover. And disclaimers and all that information. So there's a lot of, like, these are not just like the things that have to be in it. It's not things that, all the things that could be in it, but these are some of the things that could be in it. Some of the things. And the thing is, it's like the important thing is, it's like it's protecting the copyright holder so that the person who owns the right to the IP doesn't get ripped off. Is really essentially mostly what it's for. And that is in the usually found in the end user license agreement. So whenever you install software or things like that, and starting a subscription online or lots of these different things, you end up signing a EULA, an end user license agreement. And what that is agreeing to the licensing terms. That yeah, and so there's like different ways that you could do it. You could say I agree, or the shrink wrap agreement, where if you open the package of it and take it out, where you're breaking the seal, then you're agreeing to the terms of service. And when you do, you agree to whatever the contract is, because that's what the EULA is. It's a special contract that protects the rights of the copyright holder, for the most part, to make sure that they don't get ripped off, whether it's in name or in money-wise, or both. Okay, so let's go over some common licensing. So first of all, proprietary software license. This is kind of like the easiest. This grants ability for usually one or more copies. Usually one, but maybe like a couple. So like say you get some software and you can install it. It will tell you can install this on 2 computers, or you can install it on 1 computer. It will tell you, right? And so that's one of the ways that it can limit your use of it. The thing is like of the licensing that we're talking about, this is the most restrictive in what the user can do, because just because you're paying for a license to use it, you're not actually paying to do anything you want with it most of the time. But there's things that you can do. Like, so for example, when you buy a game, like let's say you buy the new hottest game for the new hottest console, even if you're buying like a tangible disc, that doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want to that game. You're agreeing to their terms of service when you open it up and you use it, because and one of those things is like you're not supposed to modify it, you're not supposed to sell modifications for it, like all these different things. You are agreeing to these terms of service when you open it up, and there's some reasons behind it. The opposite of that is going to be like the open software licensing. And there's like a few of those, but oftentimes it's free to use and modify and distribute. Now, one thing that I will say before I move on is that when we use free for lots of different things, like free to understand or free to that doesn't cost money, and I'm going to be using it pretty loosely. But just as a heads up, that even though oftentimes proprietary software costs money and open source does not, that's not always the case. There's instances where proprietary software could be free, and there could be instances where open source could be, it could come at a fee. The idea is that when you obtain the license for proprietary software, you could just use it. You can't really do anything. You don't see the code that's used to make it. Whereas open source, they will give you the exe file, and then they will give you the code that goes with it. Okay, so let's go over like what open source, some common open source licensing are. So the first one is the GNU GPL. And what this is it's free to run and free to share and to modify. The one big thing is the derivatives of it must contain that same license. And this is often called the copyleft. So what that means is, say you are building software and there's a chunk that exists with a GNL GPL, and you could use it and it's great and it makes your software available. The thing is like, since you included that GPL in your or that software that has that GPL tied to it, then that means that your software has to use that license as well. Okay, so you can't make it proprietary. It makes, if your software is proprietary, you add that software that has a GPL in it, it's most likely no longer proprietary anymore. That's just one thing, one possibility. Another type of open source can be very common to this, and there's could be overlap, but Creative Commons is another open source sort of thing. So Creative Commons isn't just for software. It could be used for videos, for music, for photography, like all these different things. But there's also different versions of it. So like, for instance, like Unsplash, Unsplash has even different rules on whatever the image holder wants to do with it. So like they might say, hey, you can use this whenever you want and make money off of it. I don't care, just as long as you cite me as the person that made this content. Okay. There's other instances of Creative Commons, like Cards Against Humanity, where they don't want you to make any money off of it, right? If you ever played Cards Against Humanity, it's like apples to apples, but not really kids friendly. Anyways, if you have time, maybe check it out. Not a professional recommendation, but it's something that's out there. Anyways, with Cards Against Humanity, like, you have these different cards and people can write whatever they want on them. And the company that owns Cards Against Humanity encourages this. Sometimes they give you even blank cards to write on, and that's totally cool with them. The thing is they don't want you to make additional money off of it. So the thing is like with Creative Commons, if you see Creative Commons and you see it being used, just make sure you know the what's required of you. And it's usually, in my experience with Creative Commons, it's pretty easy to see what you can and can't do with it, especially if you're going through the Creative Commons site. So use that. Another open source license is the MIT license. It allows users to reuse the software as long as the software copies include the license. It's kind of like the GNL GPL, but it's also kind of different. I don't want to get too much into the details. I just wanted the biggest focus is just seeing that open source and proprietary are two different things, and that there's kind of get a feel for how open source can be different. And then I also want to focus on the pros and cons of being open source. So let's start with the pros. Why open source? Good question. So first of all, it contributes to the greater good. Oftentimes when people program software for that's open source, they kind of feel like it's part of the culture, the understanding of computer programming, of the computer science understanding. They want it to, they're like they're kind of paying it forward sort of thing. They've learned and they want to help other people learn with them. Maybe. I mean, that's just one of the reasons why they could do it. Another thing is to build the resume. Oftentimes, somebody will figure out how to program in a language and they just say, hey, I can do this. And then a company would say, yeah, but you don't have any experience. This is a good way to get experience for some people, is to contribute to open source bodies of work. Another reason why people might like open source is because they find other ways to monetize it. So for instance, you have the software as open source, but a company, the way that they could make their money is their service for it, like training people how to use it, answering questions about making sure it works on people's computers, like those sorts of things could be a way that people could monetize in open source. So it's still open source. Maybe they even don't even charge for the software. It's the service that's the fee. Okay. But there's a lot of reasons why people don't like open source. In fact, some companies, like if you join as a programmer, they may say specifically, don't use open source code in your agreement to work at that place. They might even make it a fireable offense. And the idea is like, if you remember with the GNU GPL, that copy left, the thing is like, if that bit of code enters into their proprietary software, then they're legally required to disclose what's their entire proprietary work, so other people can copy it and stuff like that. So it's something that it's harder to monetize with open source. It's harder to protect. And so if you turn your proprietary software into legally requiring it to being forced to require it to be open source, companies don't usually like that too much. So that's why they may put it in an employment contract that you are not going to use open source software. So the thing is, it's like it makes it really hard to make proprietary software when you do that. And so if you do, and if a company does include that, it doesn't necessarily mean it's like, guess I gotta just show all my code to everybody. No, usually what that means is expensive court times. Going to court, paying legal fees, that's a big headache for something that companies don't usually want to pay for. But may feel like they have to out of obligation. So that's why they create these things where they say no open source software in their software. But in general, like why a company might not start with an open source is because, like I said, it's hard to protect it. People may try to rip it off. They might not want to cite where they got it from for whatever the contract says for the EULA. People could violate it, and it makes it very hard to see how they violate it. With proprietary, it's pretty easy. You say, if you notice like your software is on everybody's computer and only one person paid for it, then you have a clear violation. Whereas if with open source, like say you the distribution, it gets kind of weird. So the idea is like open source, harder to control. And so that's why a reason why people might not do it. And so then that leads to IP theft. So some examples of that is where people download streaming movies. Like if they torrent a movie, that's stealing IP theft. Also, downloading songs is usually considered IP theft. One of the earliest examples of this was Napster, and Napster was originally taken down around turn of the century, but few other ones have popped up since then. Like Kazaa, LimeWire, Morpheus, like there's been some others in there. It's been interesting to see how the record industry has responded to this. One of the things that that companies have done was Apple was one of the first to sell music files, and they said, all right, here, you want music on your computer? Here it is. Just you can't give it out to people. And so there was like some things that were embedded in the files that prevented people from distributing it. Another thing, type of IP theft is where you steal anybody's information and you present it as your own. Plagiarism, it's IP theft. That's what I'm talking about. So, like, if you say, here's, you have a website and you say, all right, I'm going to take all this stuff and put it on my website, IP theft. Plagiarizing paper, just talked about that. And like copying, like the thing is, it's like when you don't cite things, you're stealing. Because ideally, not ideally, but IP theft, as it says at the bottom of the slide, is unauthorized copy distribution or sale of the copyrighted work. And it could be all of those, it could be only one of those, it could be a few of them. The idea is it's like any one of these are violated, or any one or few of these is violated, it's subject to IP theft. And that's something that usually the person that holds the IP looks at unfavorably. Okay. The next thing that we're going to talk about is cybercrimes. And there's a few different ones. There's like identity theft. That's clearly where you're pretending to be somebody that you're not online, such as using social security number to get into bank accounts and stuff like that. Maybe a way that they get it is through fraud, which is also pretending that you're somebody that you're not, but it's to get information with the intention of, it could be for identity theft, it could be for whatever the reason. Fraud is a form of deception. Data breach is unauthorized access to secure or classified information. And so that could be from somebody stealing a password. It could be a weak password. There could be something that maybe somebody accidentally leaves a laptop somewhere with sensitive information, and then somebody, some bad actor finds it, and they take advantage of like a weak password or no password or stuff like that. The thing is like data breach happens for people that aren't intended to use it, and it usually happens from poor security systems or poorly used security systems. So kind of if you think about like information being contained in a building and it's a locked door, and so you have only a certain amount of people with keys into that building. If they just let somebody in, or if the door is just really easy to open, all those things make it too easy for somebody to come in there and get the information and go when they're not supposed to. Another thing that could be associated with cybercrimes is trafficking. And this is conducting deals or trades in an illegal commodity. Human trafficking is an example because it is illegal to sell humans as a commodity. That could be also drug trafficking or arms trafficking. Arms trafficking is not physical arms; it's guns usually. But it's these trading of things that are deemed illegal, and it's a punishable offense even when it's online. Extortion is the act of obtaining something by making threats. We've talked about this, is especially tied with malware, where it's like where you have ransomware is an example where you either give the illusion that you have control of someone's computer and the only way that they can get it is if they pay you money, or you actually take control of somebody's computer and the only way that they can get control of it, or you tell them that you can give control of it, is if they give you money. But you could also destroy everything, which seems pretty heinous. Another thing is harassment, and this seems to be a very common type of cybercrime, and we'll give an example of this later. And this is where it's an offensive, repetitive behavior typically used to upset or intimidate somebody. So the way that different organizations look into this is digital forensics. So they are able to analyze a picture and determine it's been tampered with. Maybe they could look at emails that were sent and that sort of thing. That also kind of can go into surveillance and decryptions, because decryption is where it's an encrypted file and they just decrypt it and see whatever the person was doing that was illegal. Or surveillance, it's watching these people going to these places that they're not supposed to, and dealing with things that they're not supposed to. So, like for instance, you could have, remember like how I described the internet as being like two people on opposite sides of the room talking with each other, and anybody can hear them talk. Surveillance could be listening to someone talk about their nefarious deeds or something like that, or listening to the websites that they're going to, or getting stuff from. Now, it could be encrypted and they might not be able to see what's coming from it, but they can see that you have from point A information that could be you, and point B is a thing that's known for selling illegal commodities. And so if it sees you there a lot, it's not going to look too good. And the thing is, it's like with some of these things, it doesn't say that the criminal evidence might not be enough for one thing, but if they're able to get a bunch of different things, it could help paint the picture that you're doing, like an individual is doing something that they're not supposed to. Okay. And one thing that people are not supposed to do online is cyberbullying. So cyberbullying is the willful use of electronic technology to repeatedly threaten, abuse, and dominate others, oftentimes anonymously. The thing is like with cyberbullying versus normal bullying is that it's harder to separate from the bullying, right? So normal bullying is thought of as like a kid bothering another kid at school. So the thing is like when the kid's not in school, they're not getting bullied. However, with cyberbullying, this is usually often it's on social media, and kids will do this on their phone, kids or adults. Oftentimes, cyberbullying is tied to kids. But the thing is like when it's using social media, it's harder to identify the instigators, right? Because there's a lot of different things for people to do anonymously, or they could create fake accounts, so it's hard to know who is harassing you. But when they're saying hurtful things that are really messing somebody up, that's a big deal. The thing is like there's no real federal laws that prevent this. In fact, the federal government has left it mostly up to the states. So states have different rules and policies, rules and laws and or policies to enforce cyberbullying. And so every state and territory has something that is tied to cyberbullying, whether it's laws and or policies. But everybody has something. And so it's good that they have something, but oftentimes people argue that we need to do more. Okay, so let me give you some examples. So one of the ways that people have found to cyberbully somebody is through deepfakes. So as a side thing is like deepfakes. Deepfakes, I often see them on my social media as being these kind of fun things where people put people in places that they're clearly not. So if you've ever, the picture on my head's kind of in the way, but the first picture up above is from the movie Addams Family Values, and the actress is Nicole Richie, and as you can see, that's not Nicole Richie's face. That's Nick Offerman's face, who is the actor for the character Ron Swanson in the show Parks and Rec, right? And so what they did in this video is they took these scenes with Wednesday, is the character, and it's said by Ron Swanson. And so it looks and sound like his face and him saying it, but it's the body of Wednesday, right? So it's just her face is the only thing that's not her. And then here they have the one below it, and they're all by the same, these are all deepfakes by the same guy, where it's the show Full House, and these different actors are from the early 90s, and so Ron Swanson's thing in the early 2000s, so it's a decade later of done. But the thing is like what they're able to do with the deepfakes is like match facial movements and facial expressions and stuff like that. So the facial expressions you see for the ladies from Full House, that's the faces that they're making. But they were able to apply the deepfake onto using, once again, Ron Swanson so that it's him making those faces. But the thing is the point of these is not to trick you into thinking that's really Ron Swanson doing this stuff, because Ron Swanson's not real, and it's just funny to see Ron Swanson do these things that are clearly not Ron Swanson, right? So the idea is sometimes with deepfakes is it's to be something funny, right? But the thing is like deepfakes are becoming more and more easy to do with more and more powerful technology. And so people are able to use them for more nefarious things. So it's not exclusive to cyberbullying. They could be used for other things like fraud and things like that. Or even more terroristic things possibly. But let's just focus on cyberbullying because that's what I was talking about before. So there is a specific instance where a woman was just recently arrested in Pennsylvania for allegedly using deepfakes on these young girls for this cheerleading team. So I think her daughter was also in that possibly in that cheerleading squad, but this lady had allegedly used deepfake technology to make it seem like these girls were doing things that they were not supposed to, that were making them seem like doing things that they're not supposed to, things that society would consider wrong, and that could possibly get them disqualified from cheerleading. But the thing is like this is like, these are kids. This is things that's damaging to psychology. It's on top of being unlawful, and it was because she was arrested for it. It's also immoral, unethical. Like, it's all these things. And the thing is like this lady was accused of doing it, which is really bad. But the thing is, it's like something that people have, a lot of experts have been saying, is to watch out for cyberbullying during this pandemic. Because the idea with the pandemic, we have less people in schools or being out with each other, and maybe spending more time on social media, because that's how they're able to connect in this form of isolation, right? So as we're more isolated, more people might be using social media, which could lead to more cyberbullying. Which in this case, this allegedly happened during the pandemic, but it's not exclusive to the pandemic. There's been cyberbullying. And it's not just from parents attacking kids, it's kids attacking other kids, and it's this big thing. So what are people doing to stop it? So Pennsylvania Department of Education offers bully prevention consultation lines. They work a lot with schools and things like that to try to eliminate it. One of the big things is awareness, letting people know that this is no longer, not just not cool, but it's hurtful, harmful, and it needs to stop. And another thing that they try to do is encourage people to talk about it. They want people to identify when they're being bullied, to identify when people are being bullied, like these sort of things, so that when we can identify, we can try to work on stopping it. Now, these are not complete solutions, because there's still cyberbullying going on, right? So since cyberbullying still exists, this is something that still needs to be addressed. We haven't found a perfect system for eliminating cyberbullying system. We might never find a system for eliminating cyberbullying. It might be something that we have to deal with for the rest of our lives, or whatever. But the thing is like, we need to work on trying to minimize it as much as possible. Because, like I said, unethical, unmoral, and illegal. Okay? The next thing, we're going to shift into the digital divide. So digital divide is the inequality of access to digital technologies like computers, smartphones, and the internet. And this digital divide is kind of, in a sense, an ambiguous thing, because it's very much tied to the literacy and things like that. So one thing that has been pointed out that helps contribute to this digital divide is the internet treated and thought of as a luxury. So with that, and not being a utility that some people argue that it should, is that not everybody will have the same access to the internet as other people do, right? And so there's different drawbacks to it. Oftentimes, the reason why it could be argued as a luxury is because it's something that's fun. You don't really need internet. The argument is like you don't need internet to not freeze during the winter. You don't need the internet to feed you. You don't need internet for the basic needs. However, that doesn't. Some would argue that that doesn't mean you don't need the internet to live in society. A lot of government programs need people to use the internet, and the argument is like it needs to be more accessible to more people so that they can use those government services, so that they can do those different things. So, like for instance, during this pandemic, the internet has been a huge thing to prevent, to keep society going, right? So think about, like, for instance, Penn State. The way that we have been able to function is through the internet. Zoom has exploded because everybody has resulted in using Zoom for, a lot of people have used Zoom for their, whatever they needed it for before. Anyways, from education perspective, instead of having a physical classroom, you have a Zoom classroom, a virtual classroom. Can't have that without the internet. Okay, so it goes hand in hand. So if you're treating it as a luxury, then those that can't afford that luxury can't afford that education. And maybe you would argue that going to college is a privilege, but when we think about public schools that go to online and thinking about the kids that can't afford internet, then that means that they can't afford education, and that's a problem for not just those people, but society as a whole. Not to try to get too preachy, but this is a big deal. Digital divide also comes in other things because the thing is like devices can be expensive, right? So a computer, it's not cheap, especially like depending upon what you need it for or what you're using, what you need it for, or whatever you're using it for. Computers, smartphones, they're not cheap. My phone here, hundreds of dollars. Not flexing, just saying that oftentimes these smartphones are really expensive. And another thing too is like that's people's connection to the internet. Oftentimes, that's oftentimes their personal connection. So, it limits them with the expense. And so then maybe an argument would be, well, if they need to use a computer, they can use the one in the library. But that's also limiting because libraries only have so many computers and people use the computers for different things. So someone's accessibility, if people are limited to computers that are limited in a local library, that severely limits their access to whatever they need the computer for, whether it's creating resumes, it's checking email on jobs, it's doing income taxes, it's like all these different things. Relying on library to help them with their computing needs is not a great solution. Another thing that comes up with the digital divide is computer literacy. So this is like understanding how to use a computer. And something that's a kind of misconception that's been tied to computer literacy is giving somebody access to a computer will mean, and they get to use it a lot, means that their computer literacy will go up. And this is not the case. So for instance, if you give a kid a computer and then maybe what they could use it for is games. Like maybe they just spend all day and every waking hour they can playing Fortnite. Okay. And there's some people that actually have been able to make a really good amount of money from playing Fortnite. So the possibility of contributing to society and stuff like that from that one skill is not saying that that's not possible, but it is unlikely. And also another thing is like the skills that people need for oftentimes for employment, they can't get from just playing video games. They can't get from just having a device. They need training. They need all these different things to be able to use the computer. How to write a resume. Just having access to a computer doesn't necessarily mean you know how to create a resume on a computer and send it to an employer. It takes training. It takes a little bit more than just having it available. So the access to digital technology is not just limited to physical, like physically if there's a computer present. It's also the understanding of how to use it is also something that needs to be considered. So anyways, just things to think about when we're thinking about the digital divide. It's not all fun and games. There's serious things that we as a society need to understand, need to think about, and hopefully grow on. Anyways, let's talk about reminders. So on Wednesday is a wellness day, so we're not meeting. Admittedly, this video was recorded on the wellness day, so hopefully it will be published today. The quiz will be on Thursday, and I have it up now, so it will start at midnight and close on 11:59 on Friday. Okay, so good luck on the quiz, and I will see you all Monday. See ya. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please press the like button. It lets me know I'm doing something right. If you have any questions about any of the content, please send an email through Canvas to me and the rest of the teaching team, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Do not send it through normal email. You will not get as fast response. These are COVID times, so it could take a little bit, but we will get back to you, I promise. Anyways, if you have any suggestions for how I can make these videos better, please leave in the comments below. Don't forget to roundhouse kick the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified for when I post the next video. Anyway, I think that's good for now. I'll see you all next class.